The Merriam-Webster dictionary defines a paradox as a false statement that at first seems true. And before you get all grouchy and click off the video because this doesn't relate to cars in any way, I promise you it does. Nothing in modern motorsports seems to fit this description of a paradox better than the street race. And more specifically, street races in major cities like Chicago and Montreal. Now, when most people think of street races, the first one that comes to mind is the Monaco Grand Prix, which up until 20 years ago was the quintessential street race. In the 90s, F1 cars got bigger and bigger until nowadays, where driving in Monaco is a bit like trying to sew with a lead pipe, which has resulted in increasingly less competitive races. Really, the only thing carrying the Monaco Grand Prix is the city's heritage surrounding the race. And it's still crazy to me that Monaco is still more hyped than the Canadian Grand Prix, which is a way better race. The track in Canada, in Montreal, favors aggressive driving and passing and all that sort of stuff that is actually fun to watch in an F1 race. And not like Monaco, where if you drive even this tiniest bit aggressive in your 1,000 horsepower Land Rocket, you're gonna go like up the wall and through a $12 million property. It just doesn't really lend itself to these crazy, super powerful F1 cars. Whereas courses like Montreal, and I'm gonna assume Vegas, are really, really good for modern F1. And I think that they're almost more reflective of where F1 is than Monaco. Monaco looks like it runs off of cocaine and leaded fuel. And I think a common truth amongst most motorsport fans is that all races are like Monaco. But as I previously stated, Canada's not like Monaco, and I don't think Vegas is going to be like Monaco. And Vegas is an interesting race in the F1 calendar for me because it's going to bring a lot of the stuff like the glitz, the glamour, all of that Monaco has, but it's going to bring it to a modern, more American audience, and it's going to be on a modern, more American track, which, like it or not, fits F1 cars. Another event that really fits the city it's in is that Chicago NASCAR race. And when I first saw it, I was like, oh, this is going to be weird because a bunch of rednecks are coming to Chicago, which just can't ever really be a good thing. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense to me because Chicago really fits the vibe of NASCAR well because it's a pretty blue-collar city and NASCAR is a very blue-collar sport. And it's also got a really strong car culture that aligns with NASCAR. It's not like Miami or LA where it's predominantly supercars and like JDM cars. Chicago is mostly about muscle cars, and the kind of grittiness of Chicago almost really lends itself well to a NASCAR race. But the reason a lot of people are super hesitant about these racing series incorporating a lot of street races into their calendars is how expensive they are. Like, if you want to go to an F1 race, it's like a good bit of money, and NASCAR is pretty cheap, but all of these street races are insanely expensive just because they've got to recoup all the money they put in to fix the streets and put up the barriers and all that stuff. So financially, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for the average fan to go to one of these races. And I'm sure that a lot of people really want to go, and they just can't because of the financial commitment. So I can for sure see why people would be frustrated with NASCAR and F1 for just charging exuberant prices for these races. But I think on the part of all these organizers, it's really smart for them to do this because it brings a lot of new fans in. And I think Chicago and like kind of more urban areas are a growing market for NASCAR. And we've seen them really try to expand in the past couple of years. And same with F1, like with the Drive to Survive documentary. America is probably one of their biggest markets now because for whatever reason, the American audience has just really latched onto that. And they're capitalizing by bringing events to Miami, which is one of the fastest growing cities in the country, and Vegas, which is another really fast growing city. And both of those have environments that really match F1 well. But even beyond that, like the just excess of opulence in both of those cities is crazy. And again, it matches F1 really well. And it kind of brings that Monaco vibe again that makes the Monaco Grand Prix so successful, and it brings actual racing too. And that's the same thing with the Chicago NASCAR race. Like, that's the most interested I've ever been in a NASCAR race ever. Like, I've maybe tuned into the Daytona 500 a couple times and just seen NASCAR on TV, like at a hotel or somewhere. But I actually turned on the TV with the intent of watching that street race, and it was entertaining. So that's why I think that, yeah, these organizers, and they're gonna make money from in-person attending. They're gonna make money from $60 beers or whatever, but they're gonna make a whole lot more money because more people are gonna tune in on TV to actually watch an entertaining race that isn't on like the sterile environment of a super speedway or one of the modern F1 racetracks. They're gonna watch a bunch of 700 horsepower, basically 90s Chevy Impalas duke it out on a really, really crappy surface. And at least that's way more entertaining to me than just the average race